Good afternoon, Investment Committee. Mr. King, do we need to take roll? We did that earlier. We failed to approve the minutes, which is item 9, open session. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes. It's been moved and properly second without objection.
I think we did that.
These are
Oh, that was the closed
yeah.
session, the open session, okay.
Without objection, the minutes have been approved. Before we go to item 11, which is the Chief Investment Officer's report, we have 3 members of the public that would like to address us on items which are not on the committee agenda. What I'd like to do, without objection from the committee, is to hear from these 3 members of the public so they don't have to wait throughout the entire afternoon to address us. These are is for an item that is not on our agenda. So if there are other members of the public that wish to address the committee on items not on the agenda, we'll take your names now. For items which are on the agenda, they will be addressed when the item comes up through the natural course of our work. So our first speaker is Charles Sanchez from Unite Here Local 2, Juan Chavez, and then Mitra Eli. Charles Sanchez. Good afternoon, Mr. Sanchez.
Good afternoon, board members and staff. My name is Charles Sanchez. I'm with Unite Here Local 2, based in San Francisco. I'm here today with workers from the Pullman San Francisco Bay Hotel, which, as you know, CalSTRS is invested through CBRE's Strategic Partners U.S. Value 7 Fund. We want to thank CalSTRS for your engagement with CBRE in response to our comments last month. Unfortunately, CBRE remains unresponsive to our outreach. We have asked CBRE to direct its management company to implement an organizing agreement that would let workers at the hotel choose whether to join a union without fear of being retaliated against. In the absence of such an agreement, the hotel could be open to the risk of a public labor dispute in the future. We believe all stakeholders would benefit from an agreement that ensures labor peace and continuous operation of the hotel for its guests. I urge you to insist that your fund manager give the go-ahead to an organizing agreement for the employees of the Pullman Hotel. Thank you for your attention, and please continue to engage CBRE.
Greeting board members, my name is Juan Chavez, and I was here last month to talk to you guys about the Pullman. I just want to say thank you for listening to our testimony and engaging with the fund managers of CBRE. I also want to give you guys an update on our campaign. It has been 2 months since we talked to CBRE, and still we have not gotten a response. I came back to let you guys know about this because I care about my coworkers in the hotel. We love our job, we work hard, and many of us have dedicated our lives to this hotel. All I want is a fair process to decide to unionize without fear of retaliation. As one of CBRE's biggest investors, we hope you will continue to engage with them until they give us the courtesy of a response. Thank you guys so much.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Mitra, and I am a phone operator at the Pullman San Francisco Bay Hotel, a hotel that you own in part through your investment with CBRE Strategic Partners, U.S. Value 7 Fund. It's been 2 months since we asked CBRE to direct its management to implement an organizing agreement that would allow us to decide whether we want a union without management interference. We stand before you today to share our experiences and struggles, and to respectfully request that the board to call CBRE and urge them to give them the green light to the management to implement this organizing agreement. I've worked at the hotel for the past 3.5 years as a phone operator. Excuse me. I made the change in career paths after moving back home with my parents in Burlingame. It was difficult for me to make this decision, but I had no choice after my landlord raised the rent in my apartment. I told myself this would be a temporary move, but fast forward 10 years later and I'm still living with them because there's no way I can live on my own with what they pay me. My parents, sorry. My parents are both in their mid-70s, and they're still working full-time. My dad still works as a sales manager at a car dealership, and my mom works for the San Mateo County Health Department. But she is retiring soon, and once they retire, they won't be able to pay the mortgage anymore on the house. And we'll have to sell the house, which is what I've known as home for the last 35 years. Like many of my coworkers, I love my job. I work hard, and I was even honored as Employee of the Quarter. I'm here fighting for a fair process because my family is important, my health is important, and being able to live independently is important to me. I'm here fighting for our basic human rights. I realize that if I don't stand up for myself, no one else will. I really hope that you support us. Thank you.
That's it, Chief.
I know the staff has engaged and has written a letter. I would just ask that the staff follow up and communicate with our partner that ignoring our letter or ignoring the issue is not an appropriate response. We realize we are limited partners in this relationship, but we expect if they have another side of the story, they can communicate that with us in writing, however they would like to, through the staff, through the chair and vice chair. But avoiding us is, or ignoring the workers is not an appropriate response. And that they know that the treatment of all people with respect and dignity is what we expect and we demand from all of our partners. Especially one as significant as they are. And if they have another side of the story, they certainly have an opportunity to address us and bring it to our attention with the full knowledge that we are limited partners and we can only do so much. But we expect people to be treated with respect and dignity, and fear and intimidation in the workplace is unacceptable to us as an organization and should be unacceptable with our managers. Okay, thank you very much. Chris, this brings us right to Mr. Ailman's Chief Investment Officer's Report, open session.
Grab the microphone. Within the CIO report, this is one of my favorite times of the year. I get to introduce, at the beginning of the report, I want to introduce our summer interns to you. As you remember, a comedy routine, yeah. As you remember, we were able to resurrect the student intern program as a summer intern program. They're technically contractors. They work for Sacramento State University. But I wanted to give them an opportunity to meet them because 8 of them were hired through Sac State and 1 of them through the new institution called Girls Who Invest, which is modeled after Girls Who Code. It's only the 2nd year it's happened, and we were one of the few institutions that were able to take on a summer intern. But awesome young kids, awesome young students. I'm not allowed to say kids. Oops. Look at all the, I'm in trouble. But I asked them to introduce themselves, the school they're going to, their year of school, their major, where they grew up, because they're very diverse backgrounds, and then a little bit about what their career aspirations. They're working throughout the branch, all kinds of different projects, different times, so they're not assigned to any one particular asset class. And so they're getting a wide range of experience. The first cohort started kind of early, mid-May, and then the second cohort started mid-June, because you kind of have the CSU schedule, but then you have the UC schedule, and they're so different. So we'll start here at this end and go that way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emilio Navarrete. I actually graduated from Sac State last December. My degree was in business management. I would like to go forward for my MBA in finance, probably through Sac State as well. My career aspirations, well, originally I wanted my own restaurant. That's kind of changed a little bit because restaurants don't do so well, and I know business be very risky. And I got interested in finance and investments actually my 3rd semester before I graduated. And I heard about this investment internship, and I tried for it last year, but I didn't get it. But I made sure that I could make as many contacts as I could to get to this internship again for this year. I even took community college classes so that I could qualify for it. And I'm so happy to be here. It's a great opportunity, and I'm taking full advantage of it.
And I should interject, these 8 students beat out 140 applications. So not quite the 500, 5,000 they had at BlackRock, Blackstone, but over 140 applications, and these are the cream of the crop.
Right on.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Alzanoon. I just graduated from Sacramento State as well, but I graduated in May. I studied economics, and I previously worked at a bank, so my aspirations were to get into personal investment, but now that I'm here, I'm more interested in investment on a larger scope, so I'd like to potentially become an investment officer. And I've lived here my whole life, so I'm a Sacramento native.
Hi, my name is Wenyu Liao, and I'm now studying in UC San Diego. I'm a Master of Finance student. I will graduate at the end of this year, and I came from China. So this opportunity is very great. I hope in the future I can be an investment manager, and my long-term career goal is to be a CFO of a big company.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Yang, and I am a senior at Sacramento State University. I graduate in May of 2018. My major is actually accounting, and I found out about CalSTRS through an amazing office tour that they have. And I'm so interested in finance and also accounting, and I can't wait to see exactly where I'm going to go from here. My original plan was to graduate and start my CPA, and I still want to do that. I also want to possibly even go into getting my MBA in finance and see where I can go with that. Oh, and I'm from Denver, Colorado, and so I moved here about 10 years ago, and I've been here. I love it in Sacramento.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pei Ying Lin, but my English name is Peggy Lin. I come from Taiwan, and I just came here to the United States for 1 year. And I'm a master's student from UC Davis in statistics. So I come here to join this program and try to explore what my interest in investment. Yeah. So my short term, I want to find a job in like analytic related jobs, and long term, I hope I can form my own business. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Elisha Reyes. You can call me Eli. I'm at UC Davis. I'm studying economics, and I'm a rising senior. Although I'm a transfer student from Santa Rosa Junior College, which I hear there's like a famous alum there, up there. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a first-generation college student. Never had anyone in my family go to college, so yeah, very fortunate experience this is. And I come from Novato, California in the Bay, and my career aspirations are to like be in institutional investing, because that's how I first like learned about the world of finance, because I hadn't had any experience in it at all. So, and I feel it lines up well with econ. So.
All right, greetings everybody. My name is Zuriel Sanders. My major is economics, and I'm just now transferring from Solano Community College to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I am from San Francisco, California, but I moved to Vacaville, California recently, about when my sophomore year of high school. And as far as my career aspirations, my grandmother always told me to become the President of the United States. I don't... that... I don't know if I'm going to shoot that high. I'll keep it in the back of my mind, but for now, I'm planning on becoming an economist for the federal government.
I can't top that, man. Come on. Jesus. Hello, everyone. My name is Keone Mark. I am transferring from Sacramento City College to UC Davis in the fall for economics. Sorry, I just can't beat that. I want to be the president line. That was pretty good, Serial. So previously, before I decided to become an econ major, I was originally a nursing major, and I used to help out for the Veterans Association for in-house care, but eventually I learned I did not want to be a nurse. And I had a very strong interest in economics from my classes, and I decided this is the way I wanted to go, mainly because I'm fairly uncertain of like what kind of concentration of job I want to do, but like the one thing I've always known in my life is I want to help people. And I felt like investing for a worthy cause, like for teachers, is very important to me because I have grown up here my entire life. If you're familiar with the area, I'm from the area called the Pocket. I went to public school pretty much my whole life except for high school. So I went through K through 8 and then 4 years of private school at Christian Brothers, for anyone that's a proud alumni like me. And then I went to Sacramento State College for a couple years, and I was just so like happy about all the teachers I had, so I figured if I can help teachers, that'd be something worthy.
Hi everyone, my name is Yan Ling Lu. I am from San Jose Bay Area, San Jose, California. I actually did my K through 12 in the East Side Union High School District. And right now I am going to Georgetown University. I'm studying finance and accounting with a minor in economics. And I am a rising junior there. So as for my career ambitions, I plan on getting my CPA right out of school, working as an accountant for a couple years with EY, and then going back to get my master's degree and then getting my CFA so that I can transition into the sell side and eventually the buy side.
What about the buy side first?
Yes, I mean, so I am the Girls Who Invest Scholar. That's me. And I know there's that encouragement, but I really do want to explore both sides. And eventually I do want to go into private equity.
I wish you had more specific goals. I'm like, I feel like a loser. I'm like, when I graduate.
Yes.
Yeah, what's a rising junior?
That's a new term.
I've not heard.
So rising is because we're during the summer year, so I'm going to be a junior next year. So rising junior would be, I'm going to be a junior next year. Rising sophomore would be, I finished 1 year of school and I'm going to be a sophomore next year. Yes.
All these cool, hip, new terms. So welcome to you guys. You can go ahead and be seated. Congratulations.
That's awesome. Makes me want to go back to school.
Nice kids.
Stop that.
That's awesome, Chris.
I'm ready to vote for president.
I know.
They're fun. They've been a blast. Who's got the remote control? Somebody somewhere. Thank you, Stephen. So I'll go through this quickly since that took some time. There we go. I updated these slides from what was downloaded on the web because we got the June 30 values done. We won't have the return of the fund until Friday, and we won't have all the benchmark returns until Monday. So I won't really know what our net alpha is until Monday, but we will announce to you before you leave on Friday what the fund return was. The asset value is 208.7. I thought we'd hit 210. But the controller, and it wasn't just the controller, but we paid teachers the benefits on the first of the month. And I thought it would go out on July 1st, but it went out on June 30 because that was a Friday. They wanted it in the bank before it hit on Saturday. So I was a day off on the cash flow, and otherwise we would have been 210 billion. But obviously it was a great year. You can see the tremendous growth of the fund during this last fiscal year and very positive returns. Here's the asset allocation as it's revised now. I gave you a rough idea of where it was, but as we expected, private equity, real estate, and infrastructure actually grew a little bit. So private equity was 8.1% at June 30, real estate over 12.5%. And you can see RMS at 5.1, and then the biggest weight of the global equity. On the other side of the chart, you can see how we have the ranges. And as we've discussed many times, we are very close to being on target for each of those respective allocations. Given the volatility, the lack of volatility in the markets, we still have been taking profits out of the U.S. equity market and will continue to do so through the course of the summer. But that's the asset allocation. It'll get printed in the annual report and all of our fast facts and publications for next year. So here's the U.S. equity market in the fiscal year, and it really was a tale of a pivot point. There we go, where at election day, the market really had gone sideways. It was almost a zero return from July 1st to that first Tuesday in November. But since then, it has risen dramatically. So on the fiscal year, the Russell 3000 is going to come in at about up 18.5%. A very good year for the U.S. equity market. And if you back away and look at the last 3 years, you get the same kind of an inflection point really occurring in 2016. Where for the first half of the 3-year period, the market really was actually slightly negative. But then the second half of the 3-year period has been the strong gain. So the 3-year average for the equity market is about 9%. But what you'll always have to keep in mind when we look at the 3-year turns is to realize it was a valley and then a peak. So the first half of that 3-year period was actually kind of negative in all the asset classes, and the other half was positive. But I think the important point is the 3-year return at 9% is actually a little bit above what we expect to average in the equity market over 30 years. So for this low return environment that we keep talking about, this was actually a pretty decent time period, and we'll take that 9% return. The non-U.S. equity market was actually even stronger. It hit its low really right at the start of the year in July. But then it was touching down, like reacting to the U.S. market around that November point, a little bit later in November, around our Thanksgiving time, but then a significant rally. Non-U.S. stocks are up over 20% on the year. And as we look at our peers, other states around the country, you're going to really see the return driven by how much they had in non-U.S. and then how much they had in fixed income, because those were the big drivers on the year, one to the positive and then one to the negative. Here's a step back and a 3-year look at the global equity market. Same kind of peak and valley relationship, where the first half of the 3-year period, the equity markets actually declined dramatically. The second half of the period, they rose. Net, they averaged an increase of about almost 9% per year, all of that occurring in the second half of the 3-year period. So the 3 and the 5-year stats are going to be dominated by that picture. I also wanted to add this chart that wasn't in the previous packet for you, which was really to make you aware that interest rates are rising. You know, Janet Yellen had her long testimony today, a lot of focus on the Fed's funds rate. But really almost across the entire yield curve, rates rose about 100 basis points, predominantly overnight and out to 10 years. You'll notice the increase in 30 years was up, but not up as dramatically. And the shape of the yield curve, you know, really now starts pegged at 1% where the Fed funds target is, and then climbs up almost to 3% now at the 30-year time period. So I would expect to see a similar rise in the next year if we look at June 30, 2018. May not be exactly 100 basis points, but we think you're going to continue to see that shift up. What would be worrisome is if the curve flattened, because you worry about an inverted yield curve. That usually implies a recession and difficulties. So this nice positive slope is actually a help to us. But when you look at a scorecard for the year of how did the year go, huge double-digit returns out of the equity markets, led mostly by the emerging markets, up over almost 24% on the year. But a negative return in fixed income, kind of core fixed income, was suffering from that 100 basis point decline. I put high yield in there because I thought that was particularly interesting, that high yield had a double-digit return. It shows you how much high yield is linked to the equity markets and almost not an equity surrogate, but it always gets some bumps. So the coupon yields helped out. The core values had a negative return in government bonds, but people that were tilted to high yield, people that took a lot of risk in fixed income will show high returns. So as we look at the year, you can quickly interpret how people did. By looking at the return, you can extrapolate how their portfolio was tilted. But move over to the next column, the 3-year return. And I think what's really surprising, I put there in blue, the returns that are well below what we expect over a 3-year time period. U.S. equity was 9%, but look at that drop down to only a 1.2% in non-U.S. and then in emerging markets. So very low returns, and high yield only 2.5. So I guess I should have corrected the chart prior to that. Is non-U.S. didn't have a great time period. It was only about 1.2. High yield at about 4.5. But again, you can see that if you're in the U.S., the tilt toward non-U.S. over a 3-year period, our tilt toward the USA helps. and hits a home run, but it's good that we've been averaging back into the non-US and seeing more balance. So if I go up into the crow's nest and look at positives and negatives, the negatives remain what we've been talking about for a long, long time. North Korea again came up on the news, obviously, on the 4th of July. The positives are there, but very far and few between. And in fact, I think we're probably more dominated by cautionary notes, which would really be, there we go, which would really be the, as we've talked about, assets are at historic prices. The U.S. economy is very late stage. It can stay in a late stage for up to 2 years, but that usually doesn't end well. So I think that's part of the challenge is we know that with this low volatility, it usually ends and it doesn't end well, but we just don't know when it ends. And the mantra you're going to hear from me and from everybody else is lower for longer. But I have to say, if we can get a 9% return out of equities over a 3-year period, if that's lower for longer, then we can live with that. So with that, open to any questions.
Ann, welcome in. Can we get Ms. Sheehan's slides up, please? Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. This is the corporate governance update. I think as we talked at our last meeting, we'll try and do an update at every meeting in terms of the activities of our unit, especially at this time of year because we're coming right off proxy season. So it really is timely in terms of reporting what it is we have been doing, what the issues that we've been engaging on. So before I start, first of all, I want to acknowledge my staff, many of whom are in the back of the room, because while I'm the one making the presentation, they are the one who do the majority of the hard work on these. So I want to acknowledge them, and I don't know if staff wants to stand up. I know Daniel and, yep, come on, guys. We're a very bashful group. I think you know most of them, but they're the ones who actually make us look good as we sit up here. So thank you all. So first I want to touch on the environmental engagements that we've done. As you know, since we took over the sustainability ESG managers, we've kind of divided the unit into the governance and the traditional governance activities and then also the environmental engagements. So led by Brian Rice and then Travis Antoniono really are the ones who do the majority of the work on this. So this year, like we have done in the past, we have focused on methane emissions. Methane, as some of you may know, is 30 times more dangerous than CO2 as it relates to the heat trapping in the atmosphere. So if we can get companies to reduce their what are called fugitive methane emissions, meaning leakages around either their oil or gas wells or their pipelines, or as they're transporting them, it makes a huge difference to the environment. So this is the third year that we have done engagements around methane. And actually this year we have, as you see, we have teamed up with the PRI, who now has adopted methane emissions as a primary issue for them. But this year we benchmark 30 oil and gas companies, and we benchmark them against the emissions data that they report now, the emissions as a rate of their production, what is their leak detection and repair information, and then also how are they reporting on the reduction of goals and how are they meeting those targets. So we benchmarked 30 companies and then targeted 14 in the oil and gas sector. And then this year we also did gas utilities, because while it isn't just oil and gas production, it's also those pipelines and utilities that transport that can also have methane leaks. So we benchmarked 35 companies based on the same criteria that we used, and then engaged 14 of those companies, and really had a very successful engagement, got them to be more open about and disclose more information to their shareholders and put it on their website. We filed 4 proposals, got a great deal of success. They didn't reach majority vote, but they got a substantial amount of support from the shareholders, so we continue to engage the companies. As you say, it's been core issue for us for the last few years. So we'll continue to work with the PRI on this. But I think in the next couple of years, our focus is going to be a lot more about climate change and scenario planning. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the proposals this year that were at some of the companies. As I talked about our PRI, we do partner with other organizations. I think we are all very collaborative with Ceres or with PRI or with others as we do our shareholder engagement. So this year we partnered with PRI on the methane, and then we also partnered with our friends at Ceres on water risk management this year, what companies are doing to manage their water risks, to make water usage more efficient. We filed a proposal at Monster. We've done this the last couple of years. Monster was bought by Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola actually does a very good job on their disclosure on water management. The proposal did not pass at Monster, but we'll continue to engage them, and we have sought out our friends at Coca-Cola to see what they can do to try and get Monster to be a little more active in this regard. And then also on the final is our speaking engagements. As we've done more on environmental issues, staff is asked very frequently to speak on our ESG engagements and our ESG integration. So a couple of examples is the San Luis Obispo County Retirement System had asked staff to come down and talk about what we're doing and how our program works. And then we were also asked to do this corporate eco forum, and we were included along with BlackRock and some other institutional investors to share our program. So we really see that as a success when we get asked to share what we're doing. Again, diversity continues to be a big issue for us. And as I think I have mentioned to you before, it goes beyond diversity on the board. It also goes to the workforce in terms of the diversity. Again, we partner with various other organizations, the 30% Coalition, where we were part of a group. I sit on the board there and then also help co-chair the Institutional Investor Committee, sent out engagement letters to the Russell 3000, and we're delighted to say that 23 companies have appointed 24 women to the board this year through our engagement. Another project that we did this year is we teamed up with Ohio PERS, Legal & General, and APG to engage 61 companies in the S&P 500 on not just diversity, but on governance. And we set up phone calls with all of the companies, with boards of members of the boards there, and talked to them about diversity, about their governance. And it really was a successful engagement this year. And I think next year we're going to continue that with those, three of those funds, and then we may branch out to others. And then again, we did the California engagement, the companies here in California who have no women on their board. Again, we teamed up with our colleagues at CalPERS on that, and happy to say that 20 companies have appointed 22 women. That's one that really resonates locally, as we say with the California Teachers Fund. You're a company in California, what more can be done in that regard? And then we continue to work on the enhanced diversity, which is asking the technology and financial services company, something that Ms. Vargas had brought up, what they're doing to grow the diversity in their workforce. So that has been a successful project, and we'll continue that into the next year. Again, we are asked to speak on at a number of panels on diversity. I think, as you know, we've teamed up with the Clayman Institute, who has done our Beyond Talk, and we really got to know them through that, as well as some other events at Stanford University and other places that we have spoken. This is our 6th year of doing the majority vote. We're very proud to say over those last number of years, we've gotten 500 companies to actually adopt a majority voting standard. This year, again, we sent 100 letters. 55 companies agreed to the changes. A couple of them were acquired and had the acquiring companies already had them. We filed 45, 32 were withdrawn after success, 9 went to a vote, 6 passed, 3 did not get majority vote, but will continue, and then a couple are still pending in that regard. We don't know if we're going to do this one again this next year, because we're getting sort of down the cap size into controlled companies. But I have to say I'm very proud of the staff and the work that we've done over the past number of years in terms of getting this change at the companies. Just a little bit of summary of our proxy voting this year. We're almost up to 8,000 companies that will vote, so you can see the breakdown of the U.S. meetings, the foreign meetings, and then kind of an idea of what are the things that we vote for. Obviously, the directors are the most votes in terms of the individual directors, and it gives you a feel of kind of our trend on how many directors we support, how many we don't. And for the votes against them, it is either overboarding or, like I'll show you in some of the other engagements where we have recommended against directors of certain companies where they think they've had some serious governance issues, like we did at Wells Fargo or at Mylan. So they're either overboarded, or we think that they need some refreshment on the board, or their attendance is bad. You know, they're on the board, but they don't attend the meetings, and as our representatives, we think they should attend 75% of the meetings. Say on pay, that's the advisory vote on executive compensation. That's the formal title of say on pay, but affectionately known as say on pay. So we voted for 82% of the pay packages against 18%, which is down from last year, the against vote. And then a variety of the other governance proposals. The governance proposals, we traditionally, as you can see, we vote for a lot of them. Those are like the majority vote, separation of chair, CEO, declassified board, some of the traditional ones. We also then, the environmental proposals and our support for those, the political contributions, and then sort of an idea of the total shareholder proposals.
Surprises people occasionally why it's a 50-50.
Oh, why?
And you know, we've explained that a few times to parties,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth just noting for everyone, why is that 50-50?
Well, because we actually, and I know we've talked about this on the political contribution one, we look very specifically at what the proposal is asking for, and if we feel that the company is doing probably 60 or 70% of it, then we will not support it. A lot of times we will write to the company and say, we didn't support the proposal, but we think you can increase your, disclosure on something. But we look at the shareholder proposals each individually and see how the company is doing in response to the proposal. And if they are already complying with the proposal, then we do not support that. The same with the political contribution ones. So we, because I get a lot of questions on that, as I know Sharon knows. Yeah.
One moment, I do have a Mr. Unterman. Let's see.
This is technologically challenging, I know.
It's, yeah, I don't have my mouse there. Can I push him up this way? There we go.
Okay.
Well done.
Go ahead, talk to me.
So I have a question about the environmental matters. What would you say the breakdown on the shareholder proposals is between requests for disclosure policies and specific actions?
I'd say the majority of them request for a little more disclosure, or like the scenario planning proposals that passed this year at Exxon and Occidental.
Yeah.
It's more disclosure of information. Sometimes they'll be, say, you need to put an environmental director on the board or someone who has expertise in that. But the majority of the proposals are a report or information disclosure around a certain issue.
Okay, so my personal soapbox is I think we have to progress to saying, coalescing with other investors and saying we want specific actions taken at different places.
Would that be challenged and it's an operational issue? Would that get to be?
Well, in versus information disclosure, is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, don't do the pipeline.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm talking about asking corporations to take specific actions, which I know is a challenging thing under the proxy rules, but it is a feasible thing.
All right, we can come back and I can follow up in terms of some specific ones that you may have in mind. In terms of that, it's always a balance between trying to ask the board to oversee the management of the company and what we would like them to have the company do, as opposed to us, what could be perceived as micromanaging. So I think it's a fine balance in terms of us looking like we're running or trying to step into the shoes of management. But I think where we look to the board is we'd like the company to do more in this regard.
Right, no, I understand that. And with the broad array of energy companies, that's not really a very practical, likely outcome. But, okay, it's just my own personal thing.
But
Well,
think an example is the scenario planning ones that passed and that have garnered a great deal of support at the oil and gas companies as an example of a specific action for these companies to take. We want you to do scenario planning on, you know, a low carbon future, what under the International Energy Agency modeling, how do you see your company and your resources and your assets performing against those various scenarios? So that's a perfect example of a specific action. Now, we ask them to report on that, but we do ask them to take the steps to do the scenario planning according to those various scenarios and report back. Okay. So we can follow up with you in terms of some other ideas.
Okay.
Before you do, Ms. Sheehan, let me just check with Mr. Hunter.
I only raised it because I raise it at every meeting. It's okay.
Perhaps we should coordinate a specific item that can come back, that can be structured around the specific request. And if there's no objection at the committee level, we can work with Tom and Ann's team and narrow in specifically what Mr. Unterman is raising and what we currently are doing or what we could do differently, and have some time set aside specifically for that focus.
Okay.
Does that work?
Because we will come back, what we would traditionally do is come back in November with our engagement plan for the next proxy season. So I think the timing is good in terms of developing, and we'll be developing that this summer.
Okay, so my request would be that the engagement plan have, at least with respect to two companies, specific actions that are designed to reduce carbon emissions that we would suggest, not studies and not disclosure.
Okay. Okay, yep, we can put that on the work plan and then follow up with you. Okay, any more questions? You want me?
I do have one question on the issue of the term climate competent boards has been raised the last few years. I think the late Rich Ferlato wrote a paper on climate competent boards. How common is that term being used, and is there a common understanding of what that actually means relative to big companies and having someone on their board that's relatively knowledgeable about the topic?
I think in some circles, it's more understood as individuals who understand, you know, the changes in the climate and what's going on. I think in the broader shareholder, shareholder circles, it's probably not as well understood in terms of that. And in terms of the frequency, I think the 50/50 project that Rich was part of, bless his soul, is a group that is trying to raise some higher profile around the importance of having directors or participation on the boards of what they're calling climate competent directors. But I would say now, in terms of the broader shareholder community, it's a smaller percentage of investors who are a little more focused on some of the environmental issues, who are more aware of that terminology. Mm-hmm. Okay, so some of the high-profile votes this year, and I think I had touched on these. So you'll see both at Occidental Petroleum and at ExxonMobil, the so-called climate change scenario planning proposals passed, and it was quite amazing this year. At ExxonMobil, that same proposal got 38% last year, and it jumped to 62%. So you can see the mainstream asset managers are now voting for that proposal, and what was significant this year is both BlackRock and Vanguard, State Street voted for those, and we're very public about them supporting those proposals. So another group had done a methane emissions report at Occidental. As you can see, it got 42%. While it didn't pass, 42% in the shareholder proposal arena is actually a significant level of support from shareholders. The same at ExxonMobil, there again 38%, and as you can imagine, we supported both of these proposals, and we're very pleased, especially with the climate change, but also the level of support that the other two, the methane emission ones, garnered.
Very understated in your comments about that. That was meaningful, significant that State Street, BlackRock. It's picked up by the mainstream business media, so appreciate your understated approach to it, but for emphasis, we put a little exclamation point that you and your team played a role in that, so good job.
Thank you. And the Neighbors Industry, which is they're again a drilling company, oil and gas drilling company. We've had a long engagement with Neighbors. They have had terrible compensation practices, governance practices. This year we co-filed the proxy access proposal with our colleagues at New York City. They had adopted a 5-year and 3% proposal in the past, and we wanted them to change it to 3 and 3 on proxy access, meaning 3%. Group of shareholders owning 3% of the company for 3 years can file a nominated director if they adopted a proxy access proposal. And we have also voted against their directors in the past because of the poor governance. This year, I would be happy to tell you the proxy access proposal again passed, but they actually implemented it this year and adopted a policy of proxy access following the 3 and 3. So we were very pleased with that and happy to lend our support to New York City. And then also, just to show you, especially some of the board members who have been around a while, on our diversity proposal at Hudson Properties, it passed with 84%. When we first filed a diversity proposal asking a company to amend their charter or bylaws of their nominating and governance committee to include ethnic and gender diversity as a criteria as they're looking for new board members, I think it got about 14% support a few years ago. So for it to garner that level of support, what's the old saying? You've come a long way, baby. That's about what we feel like on these proposals on diversity. And there again, we are getting the support of the large asset managers on these. Way back when we started the Diverse Director Data Source and all the work we've done on diversity with our colleagues at PERS, we were kind of voices in the wilderness, and it really now has become a mainstream institutional investor issue, diversity on corporate boards. Every year we do some deep engagements, and it all just kind of depends on what surfaces this in that particular season. So these are 2 examples of really deep governance engagements we did this year. One is on Wells Fargo. I think we all know about the cross-selling scandal that they had and the former CEO stepping down. So we spent a lot of time with Wells Fargo this year. We have actually voted against the chair at Wells Fargo, the chair CEO at Wells Fargo, Mr. Stump, even before he stepped down this year, because we felt he was overboarded. He was on the board of Chevron Corporation, he was on the board of Target, and he was running the day-to-day operations of Wells Fargo, which we thought was just too much time away. As you know, for a sitting CEO, we want them to be on only one other public company board because the duties of a director are very important, but the duties of someone running especially a company the size of Wells Fargo. But this year we spent a lot of time with Wells after their cross-selling scandal, after the report came out, and we did vote against their long tenured board members who we felt really failed in the governance of the company. They got, as you can see, the 9 directors sort of was between 53 and 77. It isn't, they didn't get 50% and below, which we would ask for their resignation, but 53% is, that is quite a low level of support for directors when you think the majority of directors get somewhere up in the 95%. So what they have told us is they are looking at the results of the annual meeting, and I think we'll know more through the fall and through the springtime as we go into their next annual meeting. We have followed up in letters and correspondence with them and continue to chat with Wells Fargo. I saw their corporate secretary actually last week at a meeting, and so we have a good relationship with them and have had a number of calls with their directors. The same with Mylan. Mylan has had a history of bad governance, compensation. We could go into all of the issues that Mylan has had over the years. Again, we teamed up with our colleagues at New York City and did a vote no against 6 of their longer tenured board members. You can see that we had a little more success there. Person hasn't stepped down yet, but we'll still continue to push for that. And as you can see, their say on pay garnered only 16% support from their shareholders, which is As you can see, it's the second worst. I thought for sure it was the first worst, but apparently there was one that got somewhere in the like 10 or 11%, a smaller company. So we will continue to engage Mylan on their governance practices as well in making some changes. Their former CEO now is executive chairman and still continues to receive a salary as if he were the sitting CEO. So they have real problems there, to say nothing of the whole issue of the pricing on the EpiPen, which Congress continues to investigate. In terms of just sort of the final slide, some of the things that from this proxy season, we were one of the founding members of the Investor Stewardship Code, which is a group of large institutional investors, I think about $20 trillion of money invested, of asset managers and asset owners who have signed on to the Stewardship Code, laying out the best practices. So we were very proud of that, and we'll continue to work on that. It goes into effect January 1st of this next year. So we'll be working through the fall in terms of developing even greater outreach about those. This year, we also saw a lot more engagements and more in-depth engagements with companies. Examples are the Wells Fargo, the Mylan, but the incoming calls from companies just went up exponentially for us. I think, as you know, Proxy Access, which we have supported for a number of years, supported the rulemaking at the SEC, even though it was struck down by the courts. Almost 300 companies of the S&P 500 have adopted Proxy Access, which is 62%, and that's up from 1% of those companies had that in 2014. So in the very short period of time, we've sort of gone from zero to 295 companies in the S&P that have adopted that. So it really has become a governance best practice. We continue to see the issue of board diversity and gender pay as a shareholder issue and continue to engage companies on that issue. There were a number of proposals this year on gender pay and pay disparity, which we supported, and will continue to engage on that. I think I mentioned on the environmental sustainability this year where there were about 188 shareholder proposals on environmental issues, and about 70 of those were on climate change, climate scenario. So I think you'll continue to see those. One of the issues this year that we were very concerned about is, and I think we've talked about this, is dual class share structures, or like with SNAP, non-voting shares. And we continue to work with the exchanges, with the indexes on how they're treating these companies inside of the indexes on those type companies with those types of share structure. We think that the share structure, the voting structure should equal the economic exposure. So we'll continue to make our voice known on that in a variety of forums. And then also one thing this year, the virtual meetings is kind of a new issue. About 190 companies this year held virtual meetings, and a number of them held virtual-only meetings, meaning you could not physically show up at the shareholder meeting. We have written to a number of companies expressing our concern about those. ConocoPhillips held a virtual-only meeting. Intel has held them. HP has held them. Duke Energy has held them. I mean, it's our view that once a year, the directors should make themselves available to see their shareholders. We think what's called a hybrid meeting is good, where you add a virtual element either through, by Skyping or video conference, or even audio to be able to listen to the meeting. But it is our view that being a director of a public company is a privilege, and your shareholders elect you. Most of them earn a fairly good salary to be a sitting director, and that at least once a year you should make yourself available to your shareholders, and not in one-off situations, as a group. And so we'll continue to communicate with companies that while we like virtual hybrid meetings, where you add the virtual element, and it's wonderful, I can tell you, sitting at my desk and listening to a shareholder meeting is wonderful, because with the number of companies that we hold, we can't go to all of them. But if we do want to go to one and make our point known, we think it should be available. And then we continue to engage on a number of regulatory and legislative issues. I think, as you know, we took a position on the Financial Choice Act at your past meeting. Our group put that letter together. Aisha, I have to say, did all the hard work on writing that letter to the members of Congress, but laying out our concerns about the rollback of some of the shareholder protections in Dodd-Frank. And then we continue to increase our filings at the SEC and some other regulatory agencies, both in the U.S. as well as in other markets that we're invested in. So I think that is it. Our funds, we continue to work with our activist funds. I think Tryon, as you know, took a big stake in General Electric. Jeff Immelt announced he was stepping down. They have a new CEO, so we continue to partner with them. Blue Harbor Group, I think some of you know Cliff Robbins. We were very pleased that they actually adopted a new ESG policy as they're looking at companies and identifying companies for their portfolio. They're integrating ESG into their screening process, which we were very pleased about. And then finally, as you know, we are looking for some new sustainability managers. We're in the second round of the due diligence questionnaires, and staff is right now reviewing those submissions, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to you in the fall with an announcement about some of the new managers that we've selected in that space.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. A lot of great work that you and your staff are doing and continue to do. And I was curious if you could give us a quick update on Netflix. And I think I read a press release that CalSTRS had co-filed shareholder proposals and had done this for a couple of years.
Aisha? So I'm going to ask Aisha Mastagni, who's led our group on Netflix.
So from the press release I read, it looked like it was advisory only. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but I was wondering what the next steps would be.
Well, there were several shareholder proposals at Netflix. They have a history of very poor governance practices. What we had helped, we actually didn't file it, it was filed, but we helped sort of gather support for it, was a binding shareholder proposal to elect the directors by majority vote. Now, it was very close, but the standard for implementing a binding proposal, one, a lot of investors look at binding proposals with a much more critical eye. But then also the standard for it to be able to be implemented at Netflix, it was 2/3 of outstanding shares. And so that's a very high bar in order to get it implemented. But I do have a call with some of our partners, and so we're going to be talking next steps because we'll still be investors. We can go back again and again.
Well, and a little bit of history on Netflix. Netflix has had a number of governance shareholder proposals over the past years submitted there and passed with overwhelming majority, like 85%. And it was like majority vote, proxy access, a number of them. They have completely ignored the will of their shareholders, which is why we supported the binding bylaw this year, because it was really the only way to get them to make a change. I think they know we're going to be back at this again and that we're not going away. Netflix has had tremendous performance, and we've complimented them on their performance, and that is not the issue. But as we have said, and Aisha just said, we're going to be shareholders in Netflix for a long time. And so our concern is at a certain point in time that it may not have the best performance, and what can shareholders do about that at that point in time? I will say Netflix worked hard to make sure that they that we did not reach that threshold. We came close, 64% or something. I mean, it was quite amazing in terms of a binding bylaw, because most of the shareholder proposals are what are called precatory, which means they're advisory. And it's very rare that we file binding bylaws at companies, and it's usually after a company like this has completely ignored, actions time and time again by shareholders that we will actually file a binding bylaw. We did one a couple of years at Freeport after they had taken action on a merger without any shareholder approval.
And the tricky thing here at Netflix was that they had, coupled with some of these other poor governance practices, it's this supermajority requirement on binding proposals. And so that just elevated not only out of outstanding shares, which is very difficult because not everybody votes, but the idea that you also have to reach the supermajority threshold.
And how many years have you been engaging with Netflix?
Oh, gosh.
How
many years?
How many
Because
years?
I can remember presenting a proposal 3 or 4 years ago.
A number of years.
Okay, great.
Since
Thank
the
you.
performance wasn't as good as it is now.
Thank you.
So it's been a number of times with Reed Hastings.
We do have another question. Ms. Yamamoto?
Hi. I understand the engagement, the things that you do, but how do you get there? There's so many companies out there. Do you have how do you know which ones to engage in and with what issues?
Yeah. So we develop, as I mentioned before, we'll be coming to you in November with our engagement plan. We look at, our big holdings in our portfolio, the companies that may have poor performance, some of the criteria, some of the focus areas that the board has asked us, like on environmental issues or diversity issues. So it's kind of all this combination that we then prepare our engagement plan for the year, where we're going to engage the companies or file shareholder proposals. Then, so we have our own engagement plan that we do, and then during proxy season, then we have incoming from companies who want to talk about whatever issues. So then that combines with our plan as to the activities that we undertake. So executive compensation is a perfect example of companies wanting us to talk about their executive compensation as it's going for a vote, or their directors. So it really is a combination of the priorities that the board has set. We look at our holdings. We look at the issues where we think we can make a difference. We look at issues where maybe others, that's where I say we collaborate with others. Somebody else may be focusing on one. So we'll identify that, but then we'll talk to other shareholders. They're going after that issue, so then we'll say we'll work on this one, or we partner with them on issues.
Okay, so then you focus on those kinds of things, and then you do the engagement process that's already established in policy.
In our policy.
And I'll just add one thing, because I think some of the examples that were shown in the slide deck today, Netflix is a good example, Neighbors is another one, where these are companies that are outliers in terms of governance structures. And so it's really easy to identify those companies. I mean, Netflix, had 17 proposals that had passed by a majority vote. I mean, that's just almost unheard of in our world.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Yamamoto?
No.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stakey and Ms. Sheehan. Thank you very much. Item third.
Can I just comment on one thing really quickly?
Sure. Ms. Hendricks.
Because I love Netflix so much, because I love, I love a lot of their shows, and I want to see them be successful and help us succeed. I was just looking up, because I've heard so much about our engagement with them and other institutional investors. I found a chart where they basically had a table from 2010 through 2015, and you always talk about zombie board members or zombie directors, and it basically has a chart of the rejected directors who left and the rejected directors who stayed, and the percentage of rejected directors who stayed has increased significantly from 2010 to 2015. I find that really fascinating. I mean, that's definitely not the way we want things to progress over 5 years, and that's just 2 years ago. So,
so zombie directors, that's sort of this term that shareholders use. Those are directors who do not receive a majority support of their shareholders, but continue to serve on the board. The way that the majority vote is, if you don't receive it, you tender your resignation, and the board has the discretion to accept it. And usually those boards are, we can't find anybody more brilliant. We want you to continue to serve. The shareholders, while the increases have gone up, the votes against directors have also gone up. So I think it's sort of it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but we continue to work with the companies and the other shareholders about pushing for change. I don't know why a director would want to continue to serve on a board where they don't have the support of the majority of their shareholders.
it indicates a certain tone deafness to me. You're not, over time, you're increasingly not listening to your shareholders, which is a bit troubling. So, anyway.
It's troubling.
Obviously, they didn't grow up in the same households that you and I did, Ms. Sheehan. Back to our prior
lifelong learners.
Private conversation. Thank you. Mr. Emkin.
I'll be very brief. But what didn't get mentioned today is that this is one of those areas in ESG where there's a body of evidence and academic literature that says this benefits the bottom line, that there's clear linkage between good governance and better performance. And that's what this is all about. And it's just very important to remember that this isn't just an activity, but this is in fact value added at the portfolio level that affects the whole portfolio.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.